I need to talk to somebody who has ever stood at the edge of impossible, somebody who has looked at their situation and the math just didn't add up. The doors were closed. The money wasn't there. The relationship was broken beyond what any human hand could fix. The diagnosis came back, and it didn't say what you were praying it would say. I came to tell you tonight that is exactly where God does his best work. See, we serve a God who doesn't need an open door to walk you through. He doesn't need a clear path to lead you forward. He doesn't need your circumstances to cooperate with his plan. Because before the foundation of this earth was laid, he already saw this moment, this very moment you thought would break you, and he already made a way through it. The question tonight is not, can God make a way? The question is, will you trust him while you're still standing in the middle of what looks like no way? Because God is not intimidated by your impossibility. He is activated by it. So if you came here tonight carrying something that looks like a dead end, I need you to lean in. Because this word is not for the comfortable. This word is for the ones who are still standing, barely holding on, wondering if God even sees them. He sees you, and he already made a way. I need you to understand something about the God we serve. He is not a God who is catching up to your situation. He is not a God who looked down one day and said, "Oh no, I didn't see that coming." He is not surprised by what surprised you. He is not shaken by what shook you. He is not confused by what confused you. And I need somebody to really grab hold of that truth today, because so many of us have been walking around treating God like he is just as limited as we are. We have been acting like God is sitting in heaven trying to figure out what to do next, like he is scrambling to put a plan together on our behalf. But that is not the God of the Bible. That is not the God who spoke light into darkness. That is not the God who parted the Red Sea. That is not the God who made dry bones live again. The God we serve is not reactive. He is proactive. He does not respond to history. He writes it. Before you ever took your first breath, before your mother knew your name, before the very foundations of this earth were laid, God already saw every single moment of your life. He saw the betrayal that would come. He saw the loss that would hit you like a wave you never saw coming. He saw the season where everything you built would begin to crumble. He saw the night you would cry yourself to sleep wondering if any of this was even worth it. He saw it all, and not from a distance. He saw it up close. He saw it with detail. He saw it with intention. And in spite of everything he saw, he still chose you. He still called you. He still designed a purpose for your life that your pain could not disqualify you from. See, the problem with most of us is that we measure God's vision by our own. We think because we cannot see a way out, there must not be one. We think because we cannot see how this is going to turn around, it must not be turning around. We are so bound by what our natural eyes can see that we have completely forgotten that we serve a supernatural God. And a supernatural God cannot be confined to a natural perspective. His vision is not limited by time. His vision is not limited by space. His vision is not limited by your mistakes or your history or your failures or your fears. He sees beyond all of it. He sees through all of it. And what he sees on the other side of your storm is so much greater than what you are staring at right now in the middle of it. I want to talk to somebody who has been in a season where it felt like God had gone quiet, where you were praying and it felt like your prayers were hitting the ceiling and bouncing right back down, where you were reading the word and it felt dry, where you were showing up to church and going through the motions, but on the inside you were silently asking, God, do you even see what I am going through right now? Do you even know how heavy this has become? Do you see how tired I am? Do you see how close I am to giving up? And I came to tell you today that not only does he see you, he has never taken his eyes off of you, not for one moment, not for 1 second, not in your darkest night, not in your most broken season, not when you made that choice you are still ashamed of, not when you walked away from everything you said you believed. He never stopped watching over you. He never stopped working on your behalf. Even in your silence, he was speaking. Even in your stillness, he was moving. There is a difference between God being silent and God being absent. And too many people have confused the two. Just because you cannot hear him does not mean he has stopped speaking. Just because you cannot feel him does not mean he has stopped moving. Sometimes God is doing his most significant work in the moments that feel the most quiet to us. Sometimes the season that feels like abandonment is actually the season of the deepest preparation. Sometimes what looks like God has forgotten about you is actually God positioning you for something so significant that it required a process you would never have chosen for yourself. Think about Joseph for a moment. This is a young man who had a dream from God, a real dream, a legitimate word, a divine promise placed in his heart by the very breath of God. And then everything that happened after that dream looked like the exact opposite of the promise. He was thrown in a pit by his own brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was lied on by Potiphar's wife. He was thrown into prison. And I wonder how many times Joseph looked up at the ceiling of that prison cell and asked God, "Did you see what they did to me? Did you see what she said about me? Did you see how I ended up here when you gave me a promise that pointed somewhere else entirely?" But what Joseph could not see from inside that prison cell was that God had never once looked away. Every pit, every palace, every prison was a part of a path that God had already mapped out. And what looked like the end of the story was actually just the setup for the most significant chapter. That is what God does. He uses what the enemy meant for your destruction as the very vehicle for your elevation. He uses the thing that was designed to bury you as the very thing that plants you. And I need you to understand that the perspective God has on your life is so far beyond what you can see from where you are standing right now. You are looking at your life through the lens of today. God is looking at your life through the lens of eternity. You are measuring your situation by what you can see. God is measuring your situation by what he has already ordained. You are standing at what looks like a dead end. God is standing at the finish line, watching you make your way towards something he already prepared before you ever hit that wall. Somebody in this room needs to hear this today because you have been apologizing for your impossibility. You have been shrinking back from God because you feel like your situation is too far gone. You feel like too much time has passed. You feel like too many wrong turns have been made, too many bridges burned, too many doors closed. And somewhere along the way you picked up this theology that says, God only works with people who have it together. God only moves for people whose faith is strong enough. God only shows up when the conditions are right and the circumstances are favorable and everything is lined up perfectly. But I came to disrupt that thinking today because that is not the God of Scripture, and that is not the God I have encountered in my own life. The God we serve does not need favorable conditions to do the miraculous. He does not need a clean slate to write a new story. He does not need your life to make sense before he steps into it. In fact, if you read the Bible with any kind of honest attention, you will begin to notice a very consistent pattern. God does not show up most powerfully in the easy moments. He shows up most powerfully in the impossible ones. He is not drawn to the comfortable. He is drawn to the desperate. He is not activated by convenience. He is activated by crisis. And I need somebody to stop seeing their crisis as a sign that God has left and start seeing it as a signal that God is about to show up in a way that will leave you with nothing to say but glory. Think about the nature of who God is. He is the creator of everything that exists. He spoke and galaxies were formed. He breathed and humanity came to life. He is the beginning and the end. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He holds time in his hands. He holds the universe in the span of his fingers. And you think your situation is too hard for him. You think your broken marriage is beyond his ability to restore. You think your prodigal child is too far gone for his hand to reach. You think your finances are too devastated for his provision to cover. You think your body is too sick for his healing to touch. But can I tell you something? A God who can create something out of nothing is more than capable of creating a way out of what looks like no way. See, we have domesticated God in our minds. We have made him small enough to fit inside our understanding. We have reduced him to the size of our logic and our reasoning and our human capacity to solve problems. But God refuses to be contained by your comprehension. He refuses to be limited by what makes sense to you. He operates in a dimension that is completely beyond the reach of human intellect. And the moment you think you have figured out what God can and cannot do is the moment you have made a God in your own image rather than submitting yourself to the God who made you in his. I want to talk to somebody who has prayed the same prayer so many times that you have almost talked yourself out of believing it will ever be answered. You started out with fire in your prayer. You started out bold and expectant and full of faith. But the longer the answer tarried, the smaller your expectation became. And now you are still praying, but there is a part of you that has quietly accepted that maybe this particular thing is just not going to happen for you. Maybe this is just one of those prayers that God is going to say no to. Maybe this is just not in the plan. But what if I told you that the very prayer you have almost given up on is the one God is about to answer in a way that blows your natural mind? What if the delay was not a denial but a development? What if God was not ignoring your prayer but was instead preparing you to be able to carry the answer when it finally came? Because here is what I have learned about God. He does not just want to fix your problem. He wants to transform you through your problem. He is not just interested in the outcome. He is interested in who you become on the way to the outcome. And sometimes the miracle takes longer than we want it to because God is doing a deeper work in us than we even knew we needed. The impossibility is not just the backdrop for the miracle. The impossibility is part of the process. It is in the fire that the gold gets refined. It is in the pressure that the diamond gets formed. It is in the wilderness that the warrior gets made. Look at Moses standing at the edge of the Red Sea, an entire army behind him, a massive body of water in front of him, no boat, no bridge, no visible escape route, and 2 million people looking at him like he had lost his mind for leading them out of Egypt just to die at the water's edge. From every human angle, this was over. This was done. There was no logical solution to what they were facing. But what looked like a trap to the enemy was actually a stage that God had set for one of the greatest demonstrations of divine power in human history. Because God was not about to let Pharaoh have the last word. God was not about to let the enemy write the ending to that story. And he is not about to let the enemy write the ending to yours either. The impossibility you are standing in front of right now is not evidence that God has abandoned you. It is actually the very environment in which God is most glorified. Because when he makes a way where there was no way, nobody gets the credit but him. When he opens a door that had no business opening, nobody gets the praise but him. When he turns around a situation that every expert said was finished, nobody gets the worship but him. And maybe that is exactly the point. Maybe God allowed the situation to get to this level of impossible so that when the breakthrough comes, there will be no question in your mind or anybody else's about who did it. I need to have an honest conversation today about something that the church does not always talk about with enough rawness and enough realness. And that is the waiting. Not the pretty waiting. Not the Instagram caption waiting where everything looks peaceful and your faith looks polished and you are posting scriptures every morning like the process is not costing you anything. I am talking about the real waiting, the kind that keeps you up at 3 a.m, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you believed, the kind where you have done everything right, you have prayed, you have fasted, you have stood on the word, you have surrounded yourself with community, you have done the work, you have shown up even when you did not feel like it, and still, nothing has moved. Still the situation looks the same. Still the answer has not come. Still the door has not opened. Still the healing has not manifested. Still the provision has not arrived. And in that stillness, in that silence, in that space between the promise and the fulfillment, your faith is being tested in ways that nothing else could ever test it. Because faith is not faith when everything is going well. I need somebody to really hear that. When the bills are paid and the relationship is healthy and the doctor's report is good and the children are doing fine and the career is moving forward, it does not take much faith to trust God in that season. Anybody can trust God when life is cooperating. Anybody can sing his praises when the sun is shining and the path is clear and the way is easy. But trust, real trust, deep trust, the kind of trust that transforms you from the inside out, that trust is only developed in the dark. It is only forged in the fire. It is only built in the seasons where you have nothing left to hold on to except the word of God and the character of God and the track record of a God who has never once failed you, even when it felt like he had. And I want to speak to somebody today who is in that season right now. You are in the waiting, and the waiting has been long, longer than you expected, longer than you prepared for, longer than you think you can endure. And the enemy has been using every single day of that waiting to whisper lies into your ear. He has been telling you that the wait means the answer is no. He has been telling you that the silence means God does not care. He has been telling you that the length of the process is proof that you are not who God said you are, and you will not receive what God said you would receive. And the dangerous thing about those lies is that they come in quiet. They do not come in loud, dramatic moments. They come in the ordinary, mundane days of the waiting, when nothing is happening and everything feels stagnant, and you are just trying to get through one more day with your faith still intact. But I need you to understand what the waiting is actually doing in you, because God is not wasting your waiting. He is not sitting in heaven watching you suffer through this season with no purpose behind it. Every single day of the wait is working something in you that the breakthrough alone could never produce. Patience is not something God can just hand you. It has to be grown in you. And it can only be grown through a process that requires you to keep trusting when trusting is hard. Endurance is not something that is deposited into your spirit through a single prayer. It is developed through seasons that demand more from you than you think you have to give. And character, the deep, settled, unshakable character that God is building in you. That character cannot be formed in comfort. It can only be formed in the crucible of a process that costs you something real. Think about David for a moment. This is a man who was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd boy out in the field. Samuel poured that oil over his head, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And in that moment, the promise was real, and the calling was confirmed, and the future was sealed. But then David went back to the field, back to the sheep, back to the ordinary. And then came Goliath, and the giant fell, and everybody was celebrating, and it looked like the momentum was building toward the palace. But then came Saul's jealousy, and then came years of running, years of hiding in caves, years of being hunted like an animal by the very king he had faithfully served, years of wondering if the anointing on his head meant anything at all when the circumstances of his life looked nothing like what had been promised. But here is what those years in the wilderness were doing in David. They were not wasting him. They were not breaking him beyond repair. They were building in him the kind of depth and the kind of dependence on God that you simply cannot have without going through something. The Psalms that have carried millions of people through their darkest moments, those Psalms were not written from a palace. They were written from a cave. They were written from a place of desperation and confusion and deep wrestling with God. And that wrestling produced a worship that was so authentic, so raw, so unfiltered that thousands of years later, it is still touching human hearts and pulling people back from the edge of despair. Your waiting is producing something in you that will one day become the very thing that somebody else needs to survive their season. Your test is becoming your testimony before you even see the end of it. And the faith that you are choosing to hold on to right now, in the middle of the hardest stretch of the wait, that faith is not going unnoticed by heaven. God sees every morning you chose to get up and keep going when you wanted to stay down. He sees every time you chose worship over wallowing. He sees every time you chose to open the word, even when it felt dry. He sees every act of obedience that nobody else witnessed. He sees every private moment of surrender where you told him through your tears that you still trust him, even though you do not understand what he is doing. And I need you to know that trust is never wasted on God. It is never foolish to keep believing when the evidence around you is telling you to give up, because the evidence around you is temporary. It is subject to change. It is not the final word. God is the final word. And God has already spoken over your life, and what he has spoken will come to pass, not because your faith was perfect, but because his word is unbreakable, and his promises are not contingent on your performance, but on his faithfulness, and his faithfulness has never once wavered, and it is not about to start now. I need you to sit with something for a moment that might be uncomfortable at first, but I believe by the time the Holy Spirit is done with it, it is going to set somebody free today. I need you to consider the possibility that the very thing you have been mourning, the very thing you have been crying over, the very thing that felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened to you, was not the end of your story. It was actually the beginning of a chapter that God had already written before you ever experienced the loss, before you ever felt the rejection, before you ever walked through the devastation, before you ever sat in the rubble of what used to be and wondered how you were ever going to find your way back to something that resembled a life worth living. God had already accounted for all of it, and not just accounted for it. He had already authored a redemption through it that your natural mind could not have conceived even on its best day. Because here is what the enemy does not want you to know. He does not want you to know that his greatest weapon against you has an expiration date. He does not want you to know that every closed door he celebrated over, every relationship he destroyed, every dream he convinced you was dead, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers, every season that ended before you were ready, none of it caught God off guard. None of it disqualified you from the plan. None of it had the power to permanently reroute what God ordained for your life. The enemy thought he was shutting you down, but God was actually redirecting you. The enemy thought he was burying you, but God was actually planting you. And there is a massive difference between being buried and being planted, because everything that is buried stays in the ground, but everything that is planted eventually breaks through the surface and produces life that multiplies beyond what the seed ever looked like in your hand. I want to talk to somebody who is still grieving a closed door. And I am not going to minimize that grief, because some of those closed doors were genuinely painful. Some of those endings were not clean. Some of those redirections came at a cost that you are still counting. A business that failed after you poured everything you had into it. A marriage that ended even though you fought for it with everything in you. A ministry opportunity that was taken from you before it ever had the chance to fully bloom. A position you worked toward for years that went to somebody else. A friendship that ended in a way that left wounds so deep you are still learning how to navigate around them. And I am not standing here telling you that those things did not hurt. They did. They were real losses and real pain, and it is okay to have grieved them. It is okay to have sat in that grief for a season. But I need to ask you today, are you still sitting there? Because grief has a season, and then it has a boundary. And when grief crosses that boundary, it stops being a healthy process and starts becoming a prison. And some of you have been living inside the prison of a closed door for so long that you have forgotten there are other doors in the building. You have been so focused on the one thing that did not work out that you have completely missed the new thing that God has been trying to get your attention toward. You have had your face pressed so hard against the door that God closed that your back has been turned to the door that He opened. And God is standing at that open door saying, I did not close the other one to punish you. I closed it to protect you. I closed it to position you. I closed it because where that door led was not where I was taking you, and I love you too much to let you walk into a future that was beneath what I designed for your life. Think about Naomi for a moment. This is a woman who left her homeland full of family, full of hope, full of possibility, and came back empty. Her husband was gone. Both of her sons were gone. And she was so convinced that God's hand had turned against her that she told people to stop calling her Naomi, which means pleasant, and start calling her Mara, which means bitter. She was so deep in the grief of what she had lost that she could not yet see what God had preserved. She could not see that the daughter-in-law who refused to leave her side was not just a loyal companion. She was a divine connection. She was a part of a thread that God had been weaving long before the losses came. And that thread was going to lead to a kinsman redeemer named Boaz. And that thread was going to lead to a restoration so complete that what Naomi came back with was going to far exceed what she left with. But Naomi could not see any of that standing in the middle of her dead end. All she could see was what she had lost. All she could see was what the journey had cost her. And I wonder how many of us are standing in Naomi's shoes right now. How many of us have renamed ourselves based on our losses? How many of us have allowed the dead ends of our journey to become the labels we wear? I am the one whose marriage failed. I am the one whose business did not make it. I am the one who got passed over. I am the one who was rejected. I am the one who lost everything. And we have worn those labels so long that we have started to believe they are our identity rather than just chapters in a story that God is still writing with a pen that never runs out of ink. Because your dead end is not your destination. It is your setup. It is the moment right before God does something that reframes everything that came before it. It is the valley that precedes the elevation. It is the Friday that precedes the Sunday. It is the moment that looks like everything is finished when in the economy of heaven, everything is actually just getting started. God has a history of doing His most remarkable work in the moments that look most like endings. He has a history of taking the thing that was supposed to destroy you and turning it into the very platform from which your purpose launches. And I need somebody to understand today that God does not waste pain. He does not allow you to go through devastation just for the sake of it. Everything you have been through, every closed door, every dead end, every loss, every redirection, it is all being woven together by the hands of a God who is too intentional to waste a single experience in your life. He is a master weaver, and what looks like a mess of tangled threads from where you are standing is actually a tapestry of breathtaking beauty from where He is standing. And one day you will see it the way He sees it, and every closed door will make sense, and every redirection will reveal its purpose, and every dead end will show itself for what it truly was. A divine setup orchestrated by a God who loved you too much to let you settle for anything less than the fullness of what He had prepared for your life. I want to close this out with something that I believe is going to shift the atmosphere in this place today. I want to talk to you about a truth that is so profound, so deeply rooted in the character of God, so anchored in the eternal nature of who He is, that if you can grab hold of it, really grab hold of it, not just in your head, but deep down in the marrow of your bones, it will completely transform the way you walk through every single challenge that comes your way from this day forward. And that truth is simply this: the way has already been made, not the way is being made. Not the way will eventually be made if you pray hard enough and believe long enough and perform well enough. The way has already been made. Past tense, finished, complete, done. Before you ever faced the problem, before the situation ever developed, before the crisis ever arrived at your door, God had already prepared the solution. Before you ever hit the wall, God had already built the door through it. Before you ever found yourself standing in the middle of what looked like no way, God had already made a way through it. And I need you to understand what that means for how you carry yourself in the middle of your storm. Because if the way is already made, then you do not have to panic. You do not have to frantically try to figure everything out. You do not have to white-knuckle your way through the uncertainty. You do not have to exhaust yourself trying to manufacture a solution in your own strength. Because the solution is not waiting on you to create it. It is waiting on you to walk into it. There is a difference between striving and trusting. There is a difference between forcing and following. And so many of us have been wearing ourselves out, trying to make things happen that God has already handled. We have been losing sleep over problems that God already solved before they were ever problems. We have been carrying weight that was never ours to carry because the one who carried it to the cross already took care of it before we ever showed up to the battle. Think about what it means that God exists outside of time. He is not bound by the linear progression of past, present, and future the way that we are. He does not experience time the way that we experience time. When God looks at your life, he does not see it the way you see it. One day at a time, one moment at a time, one crisis at a time. He sees the whole thing simultaneously. He sees the beginning and the end at the same time. He sees where you are right now and where you are going at the same time. And that means that the future he has prepared for you is just as real to him right now as the present moment you are currently living in. The breakthrough you are still waiting on, God is already standing in it. The restoration you have been praying for, God is already present in that moment. The provision that has not yet arrived, God is already there in the moment of its arrival. And he is reaching back from that place and drawing you toward it with a love and a purpose and an intentionality that nothing in this universe has the power to stop. I need to talk to somebody who has been treating prayer like a negotiation, like you have to convince God to do something he is reluctant to do, like you have to wear him down with enough desperation and enough persistence before he will finally agree to help you. And I understand why we slip into that posture, because the waiting can make it feel like God needs to be persuaded. But that is not the nature of the relationship. God is not withholding the way from you. He already made it. What he is doing is walking you through a process that is developing in you the capacity to navigate the way when you get there. He is not keeping you from the destination. He is preparing you for it. And there is a massive difference between a God who is withholding and a God who is developing, because one operates from scarcity and the other operates from abundance, and our God has never operated from anything less than the fullness of his unlimited, inexhaustible, never running out abundance. Look at what Isaiah 43 says. God looks at his people who are going through fire and through water and through what seems like complete devastation. And he does not say, I will try to make a way. He does not say, I will see what I can do. He says, I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. That is not a promise wrapped in conditions. That is not a maybe dependent on your performance. That is a declaration from the mouth of the Almighty, a settled, established, unshakable declaration from a God who does not make promises he cannot keep and does not speak words that return to him void. And the wilderness he is referencing is not a comfortable place. A wilderness is dry. A wilderness is disorienting. A wilderness is the kind of environment where nothing about your surroundings is giving you any reason to hope. But God specifically chose the wilderness as the location for this promise because he wanted you to know that the most barren, the most desolate, the most hopeless-looking environment you could ever find yourself in is still not beyond the reach of his ability to make a way through it. And then he says rivers in the desert. Not a trickle, not a small stream that barely sustains you. Rivers, plural, abundant, overflowing, more than enough in the desert of all places. In the place where water has no business being. In the place where by every natural law survival should not even be possible. God says that is exactly where I am going to pour out rivers, because that is the kind of God he is. He does not just meet the need, he exceeds it. He does not just get you through, he gets you through with overflow. He does not just make a way. He makes a way that leaves you better than you were before the wilderness ever came. And I need somebody to receive that today, not just as a theological concept, but as a personal word for your life. The wilderness you are in right now is not your permanent address. The desert season you are walking through is not the final chapter of your story. The rivers are coming. The way has already been made. And the God who made it is the same God who has been with you every single step of this journey, never leaving, never abandoning, never losing sight of you even in the moments you felt most invisible, most forgotten, most alone. He was there in every single one of those moments, and he is here right now, and he is already standing in the moment of your breakthrough, waiting for you to arrive. And what is waiting for you on the other side of this is so much greater than what you left behind, and so much you can currently imagine from where you are standing in the middle of the process. I need you to leave this place different from how you came in. I need you to leave with something settled in your spirit that was unsettled when you walked through that door. Because we did not just come here today to hear a good word. We came here to encounter a living God. And a living God does not let you sit in his presence and walk away the same way you came in. Something has to shift. Something has to move. Something has to break loose in the atmosphere of your faith today. We talked about a God who sees what you cannot see. We talked about a God who is activated by your impossibility. We talked about a God who is doing something significant in your waiting. We talked about a God who turns your dead ends into divine setups. And we talked about a God who already made the way before you ever needed one. And I need you to understand that every single one of those truths was pointing to one thing, one person, one name, Jesus. The way, the truth, and the life, not a way. Not one option among many, the way. The only one who could look at the full weight of human impossibility and say, I will take it. The only one who could walk into death itself and walk back out with the keys. The only one who could stand between you and every dead end you have ever faced and declare, it is finished. It is finished means the work is done. It is finished means the price has been paid. It is finished means the way has been made, not partially, not provisionally, completely, finally, eternally. And if he did the greatest impossible thing, if he conquered death itself, then what is your situation to him? What is your broken marriage to a man who rose from the dead? What is your financial devastation to a God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills? What is your diagnosis to a healer who has never once lost a battle? What is your closed door to the one who holds the keys to every door that has ever existed? Nothing. It is nothing to him, and everything to you. And that is exactly why he did it. Because he saw what it would cost you, and he decided you were worth the price. So I need you to lift your head today. I need you to square your shoulders. I need you to walk out of this place with the kind of confidence that does not come from your circumstances cooperating, but from your spirit, knowing who is walking with you through them. The way has already been made, now walk in it.